What is up, and welcome back to the Unfiltered Trainer podcast. It is the summer series, so your girl posts an episode every other week. And y'all, life has been a little bit hectic behind the scenes. I have been holding it together as best as I possibly can because I don't quite love sharing things that aren't positive unless I have a lesson that I have learned from it while I'm going through the thick of it. You usually don't hear me talk about things until they're over and done with, and I can figure out why exactly did I need to go through X, Y, or Z. And so that's where I've been at. Not gonna lie, it's really not easy. Being the kind of person that does the most is always constantly trying to achieve more, push themselves. It really is uncomfortable when you are in a position where you're placed around other people who think they're doing the most, and then you see somebody who's doing more than you, and instead of it being some like weird competition, which it shouldn't be, it becomes one. And so I've just been trying to like work through some things. I feel like being in Tampa, and I've said this on another episode, truly is like the universe, God, everything that could be above, pushing me to learn as much as I possibly can about myself, and then pushing me even further to understand, to comprehend, and then to utilize all of these life lessons I am learning to utilize them as skills and where I'm going next. And so I shut down last week. Your girl, I tried to film this episode and I cried. And I'm sure I'll cry in this episode, not on purpose. But I started crying because I'm just exhausted. I'm just having a hard time, and I'm so sick and tired of being judged by people instead of just people having conversations with me and then having to hear things are said about me. Like, I'm just really freaking over it at this point, and I just don't know what to do with my life. And so I have just been battling myself in my head as to, I know that I do as much as I do and I try the way I try because I know that if I'm doing a good job, it'll make everybody else's lives easier. And that personally, if I put my name on something, there's no way in hell I'm putting my name on anything that is not like well thought out and executed to a T. And so I don't know, like the last 2 weeks, like 2 weeks ago I was doing fine. And then last week, it was just like an avalanche, and it very much was giving 2023 vibes again. And I'm not going to go through 2023 again. Like, I will not. I don't think I could survive it. And it's all feeling like a bit too much again. And so I add all of that on top of, we are 4 weeks away from my year anniversary of acquiring a traumatic brain injury in a car accident. And because I'm not as far as I wanted to be at this point, which is no fault of my own, and one day I'll make that episode and we'll do a video episode because I feel like there's so much I haven't been able to speak on. And when you hear the course of the events that happened with my accident and how botched the care was, it's going to shock you, and it'll probably frustrate you because it's a big reason why I've not made as much progress as I should have, and why I'm probably going to have issues for the rest of my life. And I'm coming to terms with that right now. And you add on with what we're going to talk about in today's episode, which is my life, my longest relationship in my life, and what exactly happened 9 years ago that completely destroyed every semblance of happiness, security. Everything was gone. And so 9 years ago, I had actually moved to Florida the first time. So if you do not know this, I actually have lived in Florida before. And I was a traveling therapist at the time. And so I was just dealing with my own issues, trying to heal from heartbreak. And every time I would go home, I would get asked about this particular person. And I was so sick and tired of having to endure these conversations about this person. Like, I couldn't heal if I couldn't be whole on my own, and I knew that. And so as much as I was sick of being a traveler in the areas I was traveling in the Northeast, I knew I couldn't go home. Moving home was not an option. So I was like, all right, where is one place that you have found happiness? And that was the ocean. I literally have a wave tattooed because my favorite quote is, it truly comes down to, in the waves of change, you find your truest direction. That is my favorite quote. That is like what I live my life by. And so when things are getting hard or heavy, or you feel like you're drowning, as I like to say, that is when you do find your truest direction, because if you're drowning, those things don't serve you, and it's time to figure out where you're meant to go. And so 9 years ago, I packed up my little car and I drove my ass to Florida. First, I went to St. Augustine. It took like a week off. It's so funny thinking that, like, looking back on it, like, I was so naive and so cute and just so clueless about what was happening in my life. But my contract was having issues. Like, they were trying to negotiate it. Florida's funny. So it was not going well. The negotiations were taking longer than expected. And so I made the decision to just go. I wanted a vacation anyways, and I was going by myself, so might as well drive. So I had a car. Spent some time in St. Augustine, and then I knew I was going over to Destin, and friends happened to be in that area too. So it ended up working out great. And so I took like 10 days off, which, if you know me, you know I don't do. I've only taken one extended vacation in my life before this period of time we're going to talk about, between my first and second degree. And it took me a year to save up for that trip. Like, your girl does not have the funds, did not come from a world where people gave me European vacation or, handed me trips as celebratory like packages. Like, if I went anywhere, it's because I had to work for it. And so I went on this trip, and about halfway through the Destin phase, it's pretty clear that things were going to take probably longer than expected. And so when my friends left and I was just by myself, and I was like, what are you doing? Like, what are you going to do with your life right now? Like, you're bored as shit. Like, you have no friends here. Like, it could take, they said, a couple more weeks to figure out. And so what I ended up doing was I actually went to Mississippi. And so I went to visit a friend. She was living in Mississippi with her then fiance, now husband. And so we were like, okay, like, glorified sleepover. He was in the military. He wasn't home anyways. She was by herself. So we're like, this is great. Gina, just come stay. Like, perfect. And we were all going to a health and wellness conference that summer anyways. And so it was a few weeks after this whole Florida situation. And so we're like, all right, like, I have no plans with my life. I was so honestly burnt out, because that was like the phase of my life where I was like really working long hours in just healthcare. It was before I really, like, I'd started my training business, like had started teaching group fitness, but like wasn't fully ingrained in it like I am now, where it could have been like a full-time job. And so I was doing all of these things, plus working full-time, plus working PRN. Your girl was burnt out. And so I'm staying with her. We're having a great time. She's working. I'm just like hanging out all day. Like, it's so comical to think about when you think about it now. But towards the end of that time I was spending with her, we were getting ready to go to this conference. And I remember telling her that I thought that I should drive myself because it was in Nashville. So here's Mississippi if you're watching this video. Here's Nashville. Here's Gina's hometown over here. And she was like, why? Like, I was like, I can't shake this feeling I have. This is before I understood what intuition really was. I said, but I think I need to drive myself. I think I should go home after this trip. And they're like, oh, like, no, just like, we're all going to go together. It'll be fun. Like, when you come back, we could help you figure things out. Like, don't stress about it. Like, I feel like you're just like worried because you have no stability. Well, friends, fast forward to, we're having a very fun time. This is where I found my love of the Candy Kitchen. If you have ever been to Nashville and you haven't gone to the Candy Kitchen, down there on Broadway, like, y'all, I should work for them. I love them so much. And we're at this trip, and I get a call from my dad, and my dad knows where I am. So I already know, like, red flags, like, my ears are up. Like, my dad's calling me. Something's up. And the first phone call, he called me to tell me that my grandfather had fallen, and he was going to the hospital, but not to worry. Like, he just knew that every Friday I called my grandfather and I was going to call and he wasn't going to be home and I was going to be panicked. And so I, took for what my dad said. My family had this thing at the time where we loved to sugarcoat the truth in hopes to protect people. And in turn, these things tended to blow up in our face, which you will see in a couple minutes. And so I'm already like stressing out. This is my grandfather. He was like my OG bestie. Like, here I am trying to have fun. And now I'm just panicked because I feel like I shouldn't have left to begin with, because I felt like I was just running away from my problems, which is what I did back then. That was my MO. If things got hard, I just moved somewhere. And so here I was, like, feeling really bad because I thought I could have helped him somehow had I been home. And so the next day goes by, we're at this conference, and I get a call from my brother. And it's like the last day of the conference. And I'll probably never be able to forget the tone in my brother's voice, because I had never heard him speak like that. And I could tell he was crying. And he was telling me these things about our grandfather, how he didn't really recognize him and his like these different like mannerisms and things, and just how depleted he was. And I knew, because, work in physical therapy and I do a lot of stroke patients, and I knew exactly what was happening. And so I was like furious, because I knew my family had like tried to be nice and help me, but instead like I could have been home for this moment. And so obviously I'm mad, because that's just like where I go. That's where my brain goes. And I tell him to put dad on the phone. And my dad gets on the phone and I'm like, hey, like, what the fuck? Like, I can tell that something bad has happened. Did he have a stroke? And I could just hear my dad's voice. Like, you could just like see the difference in tone when he's talking to me. And he's telling me like, yes, this has happened. Like, they're trying to figure things out. Like, things are still looking good. He should be able to make a recovery and come home. But what they're all telling me and what I know does not equate to what the doctors are telling them. And so things had gotten really serious that day. I've had a couple conversations with my family, and like, it was bad. Like, I could tell like this was really serious. I needed to go home. And so that next morning we had packed up the car to go home anyways. I'm hysterical at this point because of the next conversation I've had with my family is really bad. And all I could think was, here I was like selfish. I moved to Florida because I was trying to deal with my own issues. Now I'm having fun at a conference while my family is going through this stressful time, and I should have been there. And so we're starting to drive back to Mississippi. We're all frantically trying to find flights in Nashville, but because it's this huge conference, there are no flights. I cannot get home fast enough. So we drove back to Mississippi. I turned around, said my goodbyes, got in my car with all my belongings packed to the brim, and drove home. I drove from Nashville to Mississippi, back to Pittsburgh, 24 hours straight. This is where I literally blame my Starbucks addiction on, because I literally only stopped for gas and to go to the bathroom. Like, didn't stop to sleep. Like, I was gunning it because I knew time was everything, and I was not going to be there to not say goodbye to this man. And so I drove through the night, drove straight to the hospital. He was at our local hospital at first. And I'm like, it's like something out of a horror movie. I'm sprinting down this hallway. Like, there's no way in hell I'm not going to be there to see this man. And I turn the corner, and he's in the rehab gym. He's sitting in his wheelchair, slumped over. And I just knew. And I like get choked up even like thinking about it, because in that moment, I wanted to turn around and like compose myself, but he saw me. And his little face lit up when he saw me, but his smile was not his smile. And that's how I think we both inherently knew, and just looking at each other, both knew that in this moment, everything had changed. And so I, of course, as positive as I can be, run over to him, give him the biggest hug, sit down. Like, something I like really big with working with patients is I never stand over them in a wheelchair. I never want to be like overpowering to them. So I get down on his level and I'm talking to him. And the poor man looks so sad. And I just feel bad because, you think that you can save the people you love. And my thing is, all I do is take care of people. That's what I'm good at. And so the fact that I wasn't there to take care of him really still eats away to me at this day, even though this could have happened at any time, no matter where I was living, no matter what I was doing. And so over the course of the next couple weeks, we would spend our whole life at that hospital. And as the days are progressing, they're long, they're intense. There's a lot of conversations, a lot of attempts at rehab. He tried to walk. I'll never forget the day they asked me to walk with him. And it was so taxing for him trying to walk along the hallway because he didn't have a whole use of his one side of his body. And I just remember being so sad for him because here's this man who had been independent his whole life, taking care of his family, done a wonderful job. And just like a split second, his whole life is done. Everything he's ever known is gone. And so things are getting worse as this scenario is progressing. And it's becoming very obvious to me that this is not what I was told in the beginning. And so they do another scan, and I have a conversation with the doctors. I'm looking at the scans. They're looking at the scans. I know what I'm looking at. And I tell them, you need to talk to my family. And they just kind of look at me because they know they're about to have one of those hard conversations no physician wants to have. And I dead stared at this person and their team, and I said, listen, you and I both know what those scans say. That man is never going to make any sort of recovery. He's going to be a vegetable. He's never going to have any quality of life again. I said, so you need to explain to my family what's really going on here because they think they're taking him home. He's not going home, and you and I both know that. And so I think they were just so taken aback that here's somebody really advocating for their family that knows their shit. And I know I'm right. And they know I'm right. And so they pulled my family aside, and it was a terrible conversation because here I am being the bad guy, having to explain to my family that this idea in their head is not going to happen. This man is not going to be the person we knew him to be. And that he's suffering now, and we need to allow him to be comfortable and to end his suffering. And so it was not pleasant. I felt like a terrible human being, but you have to advocate for your family. And if you can alleviate their suffering, you should. And so we had some conversations, and we made sure he was comfortable. And then over the course of some time, during this whole time that this is happening, I had to acquire a new travel job. And so I had moved back to Baltimore, went on a weekend super quick, dropped my stuff off, started my new job, came right back. And I told my boss at the time, everything that was going on. So she understood that at some point I was going to have to go home and I was going to have to be there to support my family. And she was amazing. And so I go home and I go back to Baltimore, do what I need to do. And I get the call when I'm at work. It's towards the end of the week. And at this point, he was kind of in a vegetative state and things had taken another turn. And my dad called to tell me that it had gotten drastically worse fast and that I was going to be saying goodbye over the phone. And that crushed me. And I literally couldn't speak because this is not how I envisioned any of this happening. Not with my family, not there to support them again. I'm just feeling like a terrible human being for the second time in this scenario now. And so I was with a patient. I'm losing it. I'm trying to not to lose myself in front of this patient. And I just tell my boss, I got to go. This is happening. He's going to pass away. I need to go right now. And so I rush home, grab my stuff, get in the car, and I drive the 6 hours back to Pennsylvania. And every hour, I'm getting a call from my dad, hey, this is it. And I literally flipped out at one point because I was listen, I can't handle this. If he's going to pass and I'm not going to be there, that's just how it's going to be. But if you keep calling me, I keep thinking it's happening and I have to keep pulling over because I know if this does happen, I'm not going to be able to drive. I'm going to lose it. I knew this was coming. And so they stopped calling me for a little bit. I got to town and I told them hey, here's my ETA. At this point that week, he had gone from the local hospital to a hospice center. And so I was meeting my family in Ohio where he was at a hospice center. And my cousin and my brother were there to receive me outside in the parking lot. And I'll never forget that moment because it was the moment I think we all knew was coming. The moment that none of us wanted to accept, to be quite honest. So they meet me in the parking lot and we just kind of hug each other. We all know what we're about to do. And so when I get upstairs, there's a whole line of my family. They've already said their goodbyes. He was only supposed to make it an hour when my dad called me when I was first at work. And he ended up making it, which was just crazy to think about, until the last family member that could make it in town made it in town. That man was the most selfless person I had ever met up until that point. He did everything for those he loved, for his family, and this was his last selfless act. He waited until everybody that could be there was there. And when my cousin got there, he held his hand. His dad told him that he was there. And my grandfather passed minutes after that. And the coming days after that were just brutal, to say the least, because this man meant the world to me. And so here we are as a family, like losing your patriarch. Like this was a big one. Like this was huge. And I thought like, okay, like this is what you have to deal with. Like you have to accept this. Like this is where you're focused at. And so we went through the whole funeral thing. Beautiful services. I was just besides myself. I was not speaking to anybody, like so angry at the world, angry at myself, just like was not well. And so I had another day before I had to go back to work. And then I headed back to Baltimore. And I was back in Baltimore for a few weeks, just trying to like piece together grief. I wasn't really talking to anybody. Something that is not my greatest trait is that when I am really overwhelmed, I just shut down and don't talk to anybody. And so in those next few weeks, that is what I did. And I talked to my family every so often. I talked to my dad. Obviously, my dad was having a super hard time because my dad had taken care of my grandfather. And so it was just rough for everybody involved because this was such a big loss. And it was like a slow deterioration. And it was awful to witness. And so what we didn't know was coming was just a few weeks after my grandfather would pass. I had a day, it was a Monday, and I'll never forget this day. I was not well that day. And I remember as the day progressed, something internally was wrong with me and I couldn't shake what I was feeling. And so as the day progressed, I had finished my job at work. I got home late that day. It was almost 7. And I remember thinking like, I'm so exhausted. I just need to lay down. And I'm not kidding you that my head hit the pillow and the telephone rang. And this time I'm looking at my phone and it's the police. And I pick it up like confused as all get out why the police are now calling me. And they tell me that, hey, it's so-and-so. I am standing in your father's house. And I'm sorry to tell you this, but your father has passed away. And I was so confused because, hello, already grieving party of one over here. And the police officer knew who I was because this person I was trying to actively get over was one of his best friends. So when they got called to my father's house and they saw my father, around my father in the position he was in the living room were photos of his family, obviously including me. So they knew exactly who this was. They already knew it walking in, but that just further confirmed that they were in the right house. And so obviously I'm in a state of shock. This is not one of my better moments, and I have since apologized to this man. But I did curse him out. I told him he didn't have an effing clue what he was talking about because my grandfather had just passed away and that was not my father. Like my grandfather had just passed. And he, was very kind. They must have good training in these moments when people are losing their shit. And he said, Gina, like, I'm really so sorry to tell you this, but this is your dad. Like, we were standing in your house. I'm staring at a picture of you. Like, I know, like, this person said you're still out of state working. He was like, who can we call? Somebody needs to identify your father. And here I am thinking, like, wait a minute. Now I have to go call my already grieving family and tell them that my father has literally like unexpectedly passed away and that somebody needs to confirm that he's passed. Like I felt awful in that moment. And so I called my aunt and uncle. I'll never forget her voice. It still rings in my head to this day. And her and my uncle, and I don't know how my uncle did this, but her and my uncle got to my father's house so fast that I don't even need to know the speed involved because it was within minutes because I was just sitting on my couch in my apartment in Baltimore, like hoping like this was somehow not what was happening right now, waiting for their phone call. As soon as they confirmed what they confirmed, I just collapsed to my knees and lost my shit. And I couldn't function because I couldn't understand what was happening in my life. Like, we just lost my grandfather. Now my father has unexpectedly passed away. My family is still grieving. Now we're going to have to deal with an unexpected loss, which there's no comparison of grief, but let me tell you, it is a special level of hell when somebody passes away unexpectedly. And especially like my dad was like young in the sense, like his kids were like, my brother was still in school at this time. And so once they confirmed what they confirmed, I didn't even pack a bag. I think I was literally in such denial or like shock. I don't really quite know what was happening to me in that moment, but I grabbed my keys and just got in the car. I didn't even think like, hey, you should have pack a bag. Like, you're going to be gone. Nope. Your girl just got in the car and I just left. I text my boss and I was like, hey, truly, like, you're probably not going to believe me, but my father just dropped dead. Like, I'm leaving. I don't know when I'm coming back. And like her text, she was like in shock for me. She was like, truly, you've got to be kidding. Like, what is going on? She's like, I'm so sorry. Like, don't stress about work. Just go home. And I'm like forever grateful that that was my boss at the time, because this is just like the second part of what happens when I'm working there. And so I get home. I drove to my grandparents' house. Our family had met us there. Thankfully, my cousin had brought a friend to go get my little brother at school. So by the time I had driven from Baltimore to Pittsburgh, they had gone and got him. It still just tears me up because my brother was in college. And when my cousin went to go get him, he saw him in class. He knew where he was at. They'd gone to the same school. And so when he was waiting for him to come out of class, my brother thought that they were playing a joke on him. And he thought it was like my dad. And so he asked, like, where's dad? Like, this isn't funny. Like, I know you guys are just pulling a prank on me. And it took him a minute to recognize that this was really what was happening. And so they drove him back. And so thankfully, by the time I got there, like, they were with him. And then he and I just like consoled each other. It was just awful, honestly. And so obviously when you have a family that's grieving, my father, it was just us, his kids, my brother, my sister, and I, and our family. So I had to, with my siblings, like, plan a whole funeral, which is not something that, like, when you're that young, you think you're going to have to do. And the pressure and making sure that you make all of the right decisions to represent this person is just an insurmountable amount of pressure. And so we go through those calling hours. Those calling hours were even harder than our grandfather's. Even more people showed up because I think our small town was just in shock that this family was just like being obliterated. And so I learned a lot about my father that day. I learned we were very similar people. And I learned that we also have the type of personality and behaviors that will literally give the shirt off our back. And we always have the best intentions, but the outcomes can be questionable. And it was in that day that I felt really sad that I had learned more about my father almost in that his passing than I did in the time we spent together. I had no idea of all these things my father had done for people. Like, it was just endless amounts of people. I almost passed out at one point. It was so many people, and I was like in shock that like so many people kept showing up and like the line was wrapped around the building. It was just an insane amount of support that I'm so grateful for. And so he passed on a Monday. We dealt with his funeral arrangements that week. That Thursday, my best friend called me. My best friend had been battling triple negative breast cancer already while pregnant. Like, it was just like a terrible phase of my life. And so on that Thursday, she called to tell me that she knew, even though I was going through so much, that I would be livid with her if she held this information for me. And we found out that things had progressed again. And if that chemo regimen that she was just praying for didn't work, that her time would be coming to an end. And so I spent the next coming weeks cleaning out my father's house, going home every single weekend to be with her, just spending as much time as I possibly could with her family and my family, trying to grieve this double loss while also trying to deal with the fact that I was watching my best friend pass away before me. And so my father passed that September, and she would pass the week before Christmas that year. And it was just crazy because she had given up all of this time, brought us her son into the world, like given up her life to bring this child into the world. And no matter what, how much love, how much support, she passed. And so again, like clockwork, like that job I was at, maybe it was just like, I don't know, bad karma, but I was at work when I got the call again. And it was happening and I needed to get home. And that day it was a snowstorm. And so I packed my bag. I literally walked out of work a third time. Like, I literally don't know how they didn't just let me go. I think they just felt sorry for me. Packed my bags and I went home because it was Christmas right after. So I knew I was not coming back before Christmas. And so as I'm getting closer to home, which is northwest, I'm in a snowstorm. And myself and another friend of mine, we're going back and forth because we're both like fighting for our lives to get home to say goodbye because we were both away. And so get through the snowstorm, get to the hospital she's at. And it truly is like a horror movie because here you are sprinting through this hallway again. And at the end of the hallway you need to be at is her whole family. And it's those moments when when I caught my family's eye, when I caught her family's eye, that just like, this hell is your life. This is real. Like, this is happening. There's no way around it. This is going down now. And so we said our hellos, just terrible, just, hugging everybody, crying. They walked me to her and I sat with her and I held her hand and just like pleaded with God at that point, honestly. Like, I literally would have given up my life for her because she had a 2-year-old. Like, she had so much to live for. She had fought her whole existence to bring a healthy child into this world and wanted just more time with her son. And I'm just pleading with God, like, there's no way in hell this is happening. First my grandfather, then my father, then my best friend. Like, this is too much for any human being to handle. And she passed away right before Christmas. So we had to go through her viewing and her funeral and then Christmas. And so I would zoom back to Baltimore after this. And as all of this is happening, this happened back to back to back. This scenario of grief did not end for 3.5 years because as all of this happened, my aunt would get diagnosed with ALS. My uncle would get diagnosed with brain cancer. And then towards his time, it was one of my best friends getting married. And it was just, the timing of life is just like comedic and not in a funny way. But in 1 month, I got a call again, but this time I had moved home. So after all of that, when my uncle got brain cancer, I moved home. And then I ended up living with them at one point to help out. And so I was doing a home health therapy job in my hometown. And I get a call. And this time it's from one of my best friends, Alyssa, who asked me where I was. And that's how I knew something was wrong. Because she wouldn't call me during work and she wouldn't ask me where I was. And so I told her and she said, "You're going to need to pull over. I need to tell you something." And in those coming seconds, I could have never predicted that another one of my very good friends had unexpectedly passed away. And so we have to go through yet another unexpected loss. Then I have to go through trying to recover from that to go to my best friend's wedding, which we almost didn't go to because that was the end of my uncle's battle with brain cancer. And I was so scared that I would not be there when I needed to be there again at a moment that was so important for my family. But he demanded we go. And he promised me. He said, "Gina, I will be here when you get back. I promise you." And in my head, I'm thinking my track record is not good. So probably going to have to deal with another loss on your own. We go to the wedding. It was beautiful. Such a wonderful celebration for our friends. And we flew back on Monday. It was Memorial Day weekend. He made it one more day and we would lose him on Wednesday. And in the span of 3.5 years, I would lose my grandfather, my father, my best friend, one of my very good friends, my aunt, and my uncle, and another mutual person in my life. I lost 6 people in a matter of 3.5 years. I couldn't handle, even when the phone rang, I would jump out of my skin. It took me years to answer the phone. And even still to this day, if somebody calls me and I'm at work or I don't answer, I get a text message and it says, hey, don't mean to scare you. Just was calling in to check in, or like, hey, had a question about something like grandma's iPad or something. They know still to this day, I am like literally scarred from that experience. And I say it's my longest relationship because it is the longest amount of time I spent on one thing, because grief literally consumed me. I was a different person. I was like half of a person, to be quite honest. And it took me a long time to get through that, to quite understand why I and my family were just being completely torn apart. Like everything that brought stability was just gone. And I hated for my family going through it with our own father, and then to watch my cousins lose their mother, and then to watch my other cousins lose their father. And it just made me sick to my stomach, because as the fixer, as the person people call when they need something, I couldn't fix this. I couldn't save anybody, no matter how hard I tried, no matter where I moved or what I did. I couldn't save the people I loved, and that ate away from me for a really long time. But as traumatic as that experience was, it really set the tone for me to not play small in my life. And there are 5 key things that I took away from that is really important, and why I kind of wanted to share this podcast, as it is about to be the anniversary of my grandfather's passing, which means that my father's passing is right around the corner, and I usually have to disappear, because it's still to this day just like is very difficult to accept. Living a life on your own with no parental support. You're just out here constantly questioning your abilities, what you're doing, where you're going, and just wondering why you have to do it alone. It's really freaking hard being in this scenario, but there's a lot that I have learned. And so the first thing is that healing is a process that you can't rush. And that's why some people are like, it's 9 years ago. Why is she bringing this up now? Let me tell you something, that when people tell you that time heals all wounds, they are full of shit. Time does not heal anything. Those people are never coming back. All of our lives are completely different because of what we have been through. We have never been the same, any of us involved in any of these insane scenarios. Time doesn't heal anything. What time does is it forces you to learn to accept or make peace or come to terms what has happened to you or to somebody you love. But in no way, shape, or form does time heal anything. Healing's a process. It ebbs, it flows, it hits you when you least expect it. And I can always tell when I start feeling funny, I just need to check the calendar, because I know that I'm going to be triggered in the most awful of ways in just a matter of a few days. Number 2. You really have to live life to the fullest, as cliche as that sounds, but daily. Everything can change in a second, in a matter of a phone ringing. And just when you think like you're done, you can start making peace, you can start your healing journey, somehow life just comes in and swoops you and just kicks you out, kicks your feet out from underneath you, and a whole other level of hell and pain and torture are added to the mix, and it makes it even harder when you thought you were making just a little bit of progress. And so waiting for the day that you feel like, oh, when I retire or this or that. I say this because my father was one of the hardest working people I have known, and he passed right before his financial life should have been good. His full pension from his job, his full military pension, like this man literally had worked his whole life away. I truly feel he worked himself into an early grave, dealing with everything he was dealing with in his life. But he passed before everything that was owed to him he was able to obtain. And he never got to enjoy life. He never got to retire. Like, he died early working till his final days. Number 3, those you love are everything. And so now I have learned that no matter how far I am, if there is a special event or a milestone and I can find a way to get there, even if I fly home for a day, which I've done multiple times now in the last 3 years, I will go home. Because had it not been for the people that are still in my life, I would have given up after my dad died, because my depression was at an all-time high and I couldn't see the light. Thank God for my friend Adrienne, because she was a big factor in saving my life during that period of time. But now these people that are in my life now are so critical to me that I don't care what's going on, I will be there. Because I owe them everything for getting me through those 3.5 years. Number 4, you have to find some sort of purpose in life that can drive you out of the darkness. If I fixated on everything I don't have, how sad my life is, how different my life is, like everybody for the longest time was like, would always tell me, I feel so sorry for you. No shit. I feel sorry for me too, but I don't feel sorry for me as much as I feel sorry for everybody else in my life. As hard as my life seems, it's 10 times harder for everybody else around me. You're not supposed to bury your children. My little brother should not be without parents at that young of an age, losing both of his parents. Like, as hard as my life was, I look at everybody else that went through the same thing and I just feel sorry for them, because it affected, still to this day, all of us in such a way that has completely changed who I am and shaped who I am, and just my whole demeanor has changed because of all of this grief. But you really have to find purpose in life, because if you don't have something to strive for, to keep you motivated, to keep you going on the days where you have to shut down and you just have to like separate yourself from everything, if you don't have something to go after the darkness fades a little bit and you're trying to find the light, you will not survive what is happening to you. And that is kind of how all of this happened, because it is once things got a little bit better that I was able to really expand my business, and I started the website, and I started Gina Marie Fit, and I started like my courses and my company. And then it wasn't until getting forced when I was down here to like really reevaluate my life and go through the accident a year ago and realize how unhappy I was in my life that I didn't really have a purpose last year. I really had nothing. I don't really know what was keeping me going last year. And now I have Sweating Together for a Cause. I have the podcast. I have some other things that are being planned right now. And I have the hiccups. You cannot hear that. I have the hiccups right now. This is hilarious. But we're almost done. I have purpose in my life right now. And as sad as I am, and as hard of a time as I'm having, and as much as like I have a hard time with people judging me and like misunderstanding me, I feel like it's what a lot of it is. I have so much purpose that no matter how low I feel, giving up now isn't an option like it was 9 years ago when I really wanted to. And lastly, your past, it can't rule your life. It can't dictate your life. It can't be your life. Your past is a means and a chapter in your life that can help define your future. It is what you lay the foundation upon for you to be a stronger, better version of yourself. But if you stay in your past like I was, which is why I moved to Florida the first time, I let a situation that didn't even deserve my energy or my effort define me for so long that I lost a period of my life. Don't let your past define who you are. Don't let it dictate your present. Let it be the layer upon which you build a better quality of life, but don't let it define you. This grief, this life will always be part of my story. These people mean the world to me. I will grieve for the rest of my life, but in no way, shape, or form do I let it define my entire existence anymore, because I would be doing them a disservice if I didn't live my life. It's hard. Especially if you're in the thick of it right now, you're going through it, to be able to see the light in these circumstances. But I've had these little scenarios over the last so many years, especially the day of my accident, where I fully believe that I will see those people again, because I've had moments like my accident where I kind of like braked a little bit before the impact happened, just like something told me to slow down, where I feel like they are truly helping guide me in this life and protecting me. And so that might be woo-woo to you, and it might not be your belief system, but I just carry in my heart knowing that I might not be able to call heaven right now, but I pray for the day that I will see those people again. And I will finally get to tell them just how important they were. And hopefully we'll get to tell them all the things I've wanted to say over the last 9 years since they've passed. And for the other family members since the last 5, almost 6 years. There's a lot of things I wish I could say. And I just pray for the day that I'll get that opportunity. But as always, with this podcast, I always believe in being vulnerable and being honest, sharing the truth, not sugarcoating anything for anyone, because life isn't always rainbows and butterflies. It isn't always inspiring or motivating or empowering. Sometimes life is going to kick you in the ass, and it's going to leave you questioning your complete existence. All I can tell you as somebody on the other side of that chapter is that there were so many valuable lessons along the way. And instead of letting it define me, it has truly guided me into being who I am today. And it is a good reason why I never slow down. I keep striving to be better for them, because of them, and because of everything I've lost. And so don't forget, even in the darkest of times, don't forget to turn on the light. That's from Harry Potter, if you don't realize, but it's the God's honest truth. If you're going through it, whether it's grief or loss or depression or anxiety, or you're on the outs with a job or a friend group, and you just can't figure out your footing, don't give up. Know in your heart of hearts that better, truly more aligned days are coming to you. They are in your favor. You just have to persevere and have the resilience to never give up. I'm living proof it's possible. And if you need somebody to support you along the way, feel free to send me a DM, and I would love to hear your story, because grief isn't easy. Neither is life. But it's a hell of a lot better when you know you're not alone and you have somebody in your corner. All right, y'all. I hope this was helpful. I hope you learned something from this. As always, stay tuned, and we will chat soon.